The phone rang just as I hit the highway. Hospital, the caller ID flashed. My heart skipped. I picked up. Your grandfather, Art Jensen, is in the ER. He's stable. Stable? I didn't buy it. Grandpa doesn't fall. He's the one who survives. As the engine roared beneath me, the words hit like a bullet. They told me it was just a fall. But I knew better. It wasn't a fall. It was a message. Someone wanted us to break. And I wasn't done yet. But the real twist? They weren't ready for what was coming next. Catherine Knight wasn't just the president of Riverstone Neighborhood Association. She was its tyrant. A polished smile on the outside, but beneath that facade, she was a predator. She'd turned the once quiet neighborhood into a battlefield, using threats and fines to break down every single homeowner who didn't bend to her will. I didn't know exactly when it all began, but it was clear she'd been slowly poisoning the community. First, it was the minor rules. No colorful mailboxes, no vegetable gardens. Then the fees, skyrocketing. Residents couldn't keep up. She was testing their resolve, seeing how far she could push before they caved. Then she crossed a line. She sent her goons to break Grandpa Art's arm just because he refused to sign her new property agreements. They called it a compliance check. The only thing they were checking was how far they could push us before I snapped. Grandpa's voice was steady as he told me, "It's just a woman with a clipboard. Let the police handle it." But Catherine wasn't just any woman. She was the kind of person who made sure people feared her. And now she had made a mistake. She brought her war to my doorstep, and I was done watching it from the sidelines. It all started with the letters. The first one came in the mailbox on a quiet Tuesday. Riverstone Neighborhood Association stamped on the top. I didn't even open it, just handed it to Grandpa. He read the fine print, and I could see the muscle in his jaw tighten. They were after his lawn again. A tiny $20 fine for the grass being half an inch too long was the excuse. Simple stuff, right? But it wasn't just that. The letter was a warning. It came with a demand for a community improvement fee. Grandpa just laughed. "They're not getting a penny from me." I knew it was just the start. That was the first taste of the disease she was spreading. After that, the letters came faster. More fines for trivial things like the paint on his mailbox, the garden not being up to standard. I saw him squinting at the last one, barely able to hold his glasses steady. "They're chipping away at us," he muttered, trying to make us beg for peace. The next step was more personal. One afternoon, when I wasn't around, I got a call from Grandpa. His voice was strained, but calm. "They sent 2 of them to the house," he said. "They're taking pictures." At first I didn't get it. Why would the HOA send people to just take pictures? But the anger in Grandpa's voice told me this wasn't normal. I rushed over to his house, my stomach churning. I got there just in time to see 2 men in dark suits, standing at the edge of his lawn. One of them had a camera, snapping photos of Grandpa's roses. They didn't even try to hide it. This wasn't about the rules anymore. I walked up, fists clenched. "Can I help you?" One of the men, a weasel with a thin mustache, barely glanced at me. "We're conducting a neighborhood inspection, just making sure everything's in order." I looked at Grandpa's face. The lines were drawn tight. He was angry, but holding back, holding his ground. "I don't need an inspection from people like you," he grumbled. Without another word, the 2 men turned and walked away, but not before one of them dropped a stack of papers at Grandpa's feet. I saw the signature of Catherine Knight on top. Grandpa bent down, grabbed the papers, and shoved them in my hands. "I won't be signing anything," he said. Things escalated quickly after that. A week later, as I came home from the shop, I saw a dark SUV parked at the curb in front of Grandpa's house. Catherine's hired muscle, I could tell. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. I walked across the lawn, heart pounding. One of them was standing on the porch, speaking with Grandpa. I couldn't hear everything, but I could see the tension in Grandpa's posture, his fists clenched. I was too far to hear the words, but I could read their body language. The man was threatening Grandpa. I had enough. I marched up the porch, ready to confront them. "Get off his property," I snapped. The man looked me up and down. A slight smirk appeared on his face. "This is a private matter. Go back inside unless you want to make this a bigger issue." I stood my ground. "You don't get to bully him. Not here. He shrugged, turning his back to me. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. As I stepped onto the porch, a sickening crack echoed through the air. The man had grabbed Grandpa and twisted his arm behind his back. Grandpa cried out, "What the hell did you just do?" The thug smiled, shoving Grandpa down onto the porch step. "This is your message from Ms. Knight. She's running the show now. Either sign the agreement or it gets worse. You've got 72 hours to comply." I froze. Grandpa wasn't moving, his face pale from the shock of the pain. That moment, the moment that would change everything, was when I realized what this was. This wasn't about rules anymore. This wasn't about some neighborhood fine. It was about taking what didn't belong to them and breaking anyone who got in their way. I made the call to the police. They told me what I already knew. They couldn't do anything. It was just a civil dispute. No proof, no crime. Just a couple of guys following orders. They promised to send someone out, but nothing happened. I went to Grandpa's side, trying to steady his shaking hand as he sat on the porch. The police weren't coming, not anytime soon. The HOA had their claws in every corner of this place. The system was rigged. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This was our home. Grandpa had fought for this neighborhood his entire life, and now we were being forced out. "I'm done waiting for them to fix this," I said. "I'll handle it." "Cal, no," Grandpa warned weakly. "This is bigger than us. Let the police." But it was too late. I was already making the calls. I dialed Razor, my cousin and president of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club. I didn't need to explain the situation. He knew. "We'll be there," he said. "Just say when." Then I called someone I hadn't in years. A man I knew could make things disappear. I needed help, and I needed it fast. This was no longer just a dispute. It was a war, and I wasn't going to lose it. By the time the sun was setting, everything had changed. The bikes roared into Riverstone, their engines vibrating the pavement. Razor led the pack, a dozen Iron Sentinels rolling through the streets like a storm, bikes gleaming under the dimming sky. The neighbors peeked out from behind their windows, eyes wide with fear. And something else. Hope. I walked into Grandpa's house, past the broken door, past the shattered remains of the peaceful life we once had. The place smelled like fear now. The only thing left was revenge. Razor pulled me into a hug, his rough hands almost crushing my ribs. "We're here," he said in his deep voice. "Yeah," I muttered, "and we're taking this neighborhood back." The Riverstone HOA meeting was held in a small, windowless room at the community clubhouse, and as usual, it was packed with residents, defeated, tired, and willing to sign anything to get rid of the constant harassment. Most of them were afraid to speak out, but I wasn't. Catherine Knight stood at the front, her eyes cold as she looked over the crowd, smug and self-assured. 2 new bodyguards flanked her, each one more imposing than the last. I had to bite back my rage as I watched her lay out her final plan: sign these new agreements or face eviction. She was playing her usual role, pretending to care about the community, while secretly working with a developer to demolish everything for a fat paycheck. The crowd was silent, waiting for her to give the signal to pass around the papers. That's when the screen behind her flickered. I glanced over at Razor, standing quietly in the back corner with Bear and the rest of the crew. He gave me a subtle nod. It was time. The projector screen cut to a drone shot, clear, high-definition footage of Catherine meeting with Marcus Thorne, the same man who'd been orchestrating this entire scheme. His voice filled the room, calm and condescending, as he spoke about handling the old fools in the neighborhood. Incel. My grandpa's face appeared on the screen as Thorne spoke about evicting the last holdouts. "We'll get them to sell, one way or another." The room fell silent, the realization hitting like a hammer. Catherine wasn't just a petty HOA president. She was collaborating with criminals to destroy everything we'd worked for. Catherine's face went white as the crowd erupted into gasps. She tried to wave it off, but the damage was done. As her guards moved forward to shut down the screen, I gave a quick nod to Bear. Before the guards could even reach the projector, the screen changed again. This time, it wasn't a drone shot. It was a payment ledger, Catherine's wire transfers to a secret account. The transfers from Omnitech Corporation, the company behind the land grab, were highlighted in red. One transfer stood out, $100,000. The name on the ledger? Catherine Knight. The crowd murmured in shock as the truth sank in. Catherine had sold them out, every last person in Riverstone. The entire room now knew what she was really doing, making a fortune off the destruction of the only home we'd ever known. I didn't wait for her response. "This," I said, my voice carrying through the room, "is the truth. Catherine Knight has been taking bribes from a developer who wants to wipe this neighborhood off the map. She didn't just raise fees and make petty rules. She sold us all out." Catherine's gaze shifted frantically. She knew she was cornered, but she wasn't done yet. Marcus Thorne wasn't finished with us, and she knew it. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, I heard a voice. The door flew open with a loud bang, and Razor, Bear, and the rest of the Iron Sentinels walked in, their presence enough to stop everyone in their tracks. The bodyguards took one look at the crowd, then at the massive bikers standing like a wall between them and the exits. They froze. "Please sit down, Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice calm, deadly. I walked down the aisle toward the head table, Catherine shrinking under my gaze. The rest of the crowd watched in stunned silence. The game was over. Thorne stood up, his face twisted with fury. Without warning, he pulled a gun from his jacket and pointed it directly at me. The air went thick with tension. "You're all dead," he screamed. I didn't flinch. I knew exactly what was coming. Just then, a soft, familiar voice cut through the tension. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Marcus." Grandpa stepped forward, leaning heavily on his good arm, holding a small tape recorder in his hand. The recording crackled to life, and it was Thorne's voice we all heard. He was speaking directly to Grandpa, telling him to take the money and sign the deal, to sell out the neighborhood for good. The room was silent. Grandpa had been recording their conversations the whole time, and he'd set the trap. It was the final proof of their conspiracy. Thorne's face went pale. He dropped the gun, his shoulders slumping in defeat. But before he could take another step, the state troopers stormed in, guns raised, ready to take him down. It was over. The crowd erupted in cheers. The Iron Sentinels, once seen as threats, were now heroes. The HOA was finished. The quiet after the storm was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It wasn't the kind of peace I'd been searching for all these years. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the absence of fear. As the troopers led Catherine and Marcus Thorne out in cuffs, the crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers, relief, and disbelief, and the people who had once been terrified of speaking out were now standing, clapping, and shouting their support. Riverstone wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a community that had fought back. I looked over to Grandpa. His face was tired, but his eyes sparkled with something else. Satisfaction. He'd been right all along, though I never thought I'd see it. He was the one who orchestrated this entire victory. He'd been playing the long game even when I didn't know it. The crowd parted as I walked toward him. He stood by the door, his broken arm still in the sling, but there was a certain peaceful defiance in the way he held himself. As I reached him, he gave me a tired grin. "You did good, son," he said, his voice a little raspy, but proud. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "We did good, Grandpa." For the first time, I understood what he meant. Peace wasn't about waiting for things to calm down. It was about standing your ground, about making sure you did the right thing, no matter the cost. By the time the meeting ended, the rest of the community was buzzing. People were already pulling out their phones, checking the live streams, reading the reports. Catherine Knight wasn't just removed from power, she was done. The police, now fully aware of the scale of her operation, moved in quickly to secure the evidence. The documents, the fraudulent property agreements, the bribery payments, all of it was now public. Thorne's corporation, Omnitech, had no choice but to distance itself, and news outlets across the state began picking up the story. By the time the evening news rolled in, both Catherine and Thorne were out of the game, facing charges of fraud, conspiracy, and corruption. Their reign of terror had ended, and Riverstone's HOA was officially disbanded. The legal fallout was quick. The remaining members of the board were fired. The homes that had been unfairly taken were now protected. The new temporary community board, led by Fred, the nervous neighbor who had started out so afraid, now stood proudly at the front, eager to restore what had been lost. As the dust settled, I found myself standing on Grandpa's porch again. It was a warm evening, and the sun was dipping low behind the hills, casting a golden glow across Riverstone. The familiar, peaceful sounds of the neighborhood returned. Children playing, neighbors talking, the occasional bark from a dog. Grandpa stepped out with me, leaning heavily on his good arm. The neighborhood had already begun to heal. People were cleaning up, fixing fences, and planting flowers again. They were taking their lives back, slowly but surely. Razor and the rest of the Iron Sentinels had already rolled out. They weren't here for a victory parade, and they sure as hell didn't want any gratitude. But they had given the neighborhood something it hadn't had in years: hope. "I guess we won," I said, a bit uncertain, still processing the whirlwind of events. Grandpa chuckled softly. "We did. But remember, sometimes peace comes with a price. And it's not always about fighting back with violence." I looked at him, wondering if there was more to it. He saw the question in my eyes and smiled again, shaking his head. "You're still learning, kid. But you're getting there. Just remember, sometimes it's about playing the long game." I nodded, trying to understand the weight of what he meant. He was right. It wasn't always about the big battles. Sometimes it was the quiet moments, the ones where you stood up when no one else would, that counted. Grandpa adjusted his sling and nodded toward the flagpole, the American flag fluttering in the breeze. "Let's raise the flag, son." I grabbed the rope and together we hoisted it up, watching it snap in the wind. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe easy again. Riverstone was our home, and it would stay that way. As the flag reached the top, Grandpa turned to me, his voice quiet but firm. "You know, there's a fine line between doing what's right and doing what's necessary." I smiled, understanding now. "And where do you think we landed?" He looked around at the neighborhood, the houses that had once been under threat, now full of life again. "Right where we needed to be, son. Right where we needed to be." As we watched the flag wave proudly, I finally understood what Grandpa meant. Peace wasn't just about stopping the noise. It was about fighting for what was worth keeping.